8,000 feet of elevation gain and 180 miles over death-defying trails, as well as an example of Europe's largest grilled cheese. Okay, this presentation was initially composed by David Ramser, who we see here looking over the Mount Blanc Mastiff. So trekking the Alps is an affordable must-do for all level of hikers. Our group of Alaskans was mostly in the 70s, and they have completed 3 separate Alps hikes between 2015 and 2023. Both David and I were present on the last 2 trips. So here we are standing in front of the Alaska Hotel in Cortina, Italy, for no other reason than it was the Alaska Hotel in the middle of nowhere. Okay. Mount Blanc is the highest mountain in Europe at 12,600 feet, and it was first summited in 1786. Our 12-day hike passed through France, Italy, and Switzerland. One of the things that you'll see, people typically do the Tour de Mont Blanc in a counterclockwise direction. It's a total of 165 kilometers with a total elevation gain of 10,600 meters. So on our particular trip, we were lodged at 2 days prior to the trip at Chamonix, then Les Chouches, La Contamine, La Chapeau, okay, and then Lac Combo. Then we've had an extended stay in Courmayeur, followed by Val-Ferret, La Foulie, Champay-Lac, Fourclaw, Argentière, and then back at Chamonix. So at the end, I can go back and show exactly which one of the places that we stayed. But okay, prior to starting the circuit of Mount Blanc, we spent a day on the massive taking the Guil du Midi cable car close to the summit of Mount Blanc, followed by a traverse on the smaller Mount Blanc panoramic. If you go all of that way, I really recommend you doing both of these cable car routes. It was really phenomenal. Here on the left, you can see some people practicing their mountain climbing. This is just below the chalet at the top, and the upper right is our panoramic cable cars, and then down below are some historic photographs. A month after we were on Mount Blanc, the little cable cars, the panoramic, got hung up, and everybody had to be rescued by helicopter. So we were just fortunate that we got away in time. This is the panoramic goes from the Guil du Midi across all above Chamonix, all the way to Point Hellbrenner, which is above Courmayeur. And so you get to cross what's remaining of their glaciers. Just like here, we're losing them fast. Okay. A typical Mount Blanc trek starts in Geneva, which is a 2-mile, then a 2-hour drive to Chamonix, and then a ski lift for the beginning of day 1. The trails are well marked, but instead of giving you mileage, they give it to you in time. And these always seem to be a little very quick time. These Europeans really know how to hike. And so, and these do not take into account any type of rest stops. So just being known, that's probably the as fast as most people can go. We started at Plan Praz. So we started at Chamonix. Typically, the hike starts a little bit further to the south. So a typical day starts by, we're on the 12 by 8 o'clock. We stop for a latte at 10. We'll have a lunch at 1. And then we're always back at a refugio or a 4-star hotel at 5. So the accommodations and food, even in the refugio, was very good. We were there in July, but there are still spots of snow that we had to traverse at different times. Um, uh, Generally, the trails are very well established, not very rocky, and so it was very easy going, although hilly. So at the end of our first day, we got to Les Choux, which is typically the beginning of the Tour de Mont Blanc. The major differences between Mount Blanc and the Dolomites is the Mount Blanc trails tend to be easier, but they're busier. They typically descend into lovely villages to overnight, while the Dolomites are higher, and most overnights are in refuges at elevation. Here's some of the scenic terrain that we encountered on our very first day. Oops. By day 2 and 3, you can see that we're still encountering patches of snow, even in mid-July. This is a historic church in the gorge. There's a lot of history along this route. So this is probably a 2,000-year-old Roman bridge. This is how they gained access to the interior of France and Germany at the time. And then David wanted to point out that this is the source of all the cheese that we see people eating throughout the day. A really necessary accessory to have is to have a hat. It's very sunny at the elevation, and we didn't want to get sunburn. So this is a range of the head attire that on the trip. This is again just looking out Mount Blanc in the background, and just very peaceful, warm conditions that we were fortunate to enjoy during our trip. Some of the rules along the way is that there's no dinner until you store your boots and poles in the basement. Generally, and most of the refugia, you have to take off your foot gear to be allowed in. Some of them provide some Crocs. Others of them you'll just have to go around in your stocking feet. The Mount Blanc is very well appointed with numerous refugias, so that even during the day you can get a snack and meals. And we were staying in them every evening on the route. Okay. By day 4, we had a long 12 miles ahead of us as we crossed from France into Italy. So David started with strong coffee and a cold dip in a glacier pool. But first, we're stopping to visit a memorial to World War II French resistance before going up the Col de Seine. The Italians, on the other hand, very strict rules. They have no hiking poles in the refuge. Also, in this particular one, there was no Wi-Fi. And as David says, good luck with the payphone. Yeah, heading into Italy, this is a Mount Blanc, just across the border. And this gives you a very good example of the glacial terrain that we would be traversing. So this is a nice kettle cane topography. And David and a number of our other members went swimming in these ponds. And then here's our guide. Got up very early in the morning and got this beautiful sunrise picture at Lac Comble. Okay. There's warning signs, but you should be aware of it. But then you're always surrounded by just absolutely gorgeous scenery. We have an example of an Italian telescope. If you look through there, you can see Mount Blanc in the background, as well as a Rubik's Cube of a bathroom. So we stayed at a very aptly named Hotel Crampon in Courmayeur. uh, for two splendid nights. The hotel owner actually did make crampons early on, and that was their background before opening the hotel. So they even were selling little earring examples of their previous masterpieces. Okay. Um, After the 2 days in Kumail, we left off again. So for day 6, we had a brief recovery and civilization. Then we started a brutal climb towards Switzerland with an overnight in one of the most historic and gorgeous refuges named after the famed Italian climber Walter Bonatti. And this down below, this is an example of the signage that you'll see. This TMB is the Tour de Mont Blanc, and this triangle uh, uh, is very well positioned throughout the trail. So we actually went with a guide. We had 10 hikers and we had a guide with it. It wasn't really necessary, but we thought that just for the security and the safety of our older group, that we would splurge and be supported. Okay, and here's an example of some of the flora and fauna that we saw out there. It was, again, um, superlative for that. Uh, After all of that sunshine, we came into Refugio Bonatti. It was a downpour. This is mid-afternoon, and these are our last 2 people coming in, and they were pretty much wet dogs at that time, but by evening, the rain had let up, and it was absolutely gorgeous looking out over the Mount Blanc Massif. Uh, this shows us roughing it with our hot chocolate and pastries, which again, every one of our locales had excellent food and accommodations. Within the Refugio Bonatti, you have your drying room for your stinky gear, a single set of outlets to support all 30 plus visitors there at one time, and then also, again, our 3-course meals. We ate very well, and there was always no shortage of beer and wine. Okay. For day 7, this was going to be our final day in Italy. We gear up for one of the longest hikes of the trip, which is going to be about 16 miles up and over the Grand Col Ferret into Switzerland. This this was the weather. I mean, heading into there, it was almost whiteout conditions with the fog, and so surprisingly, once we got about 15 minutes down the trail, this all cleared up. This was just the fog was just right around the summit. Um, and then this is just below us is the hamlet of Les Arches in Switzerland. And this is Champeau Lake, where the men went swimming and the rest of us just took in the local scenery. It's very much of a resort community. And unlike the Dolomites, the majority of the communities along the Tour de Mont Blanc are accessible by road, probably over half of them. So we did use a portage service to carry our gear, but there were about 3 or 4 times where we had to take all the items that we would need for that night until the following night we would catch up with our gear again. And this is at Trier, a famous pink church. And then we're crossing back into France from Switzerland. And this is the end of day 9. And again, we're now have these Mount Blanc within the vista. Okay. And our last night before hitting the trail for one last day, we're in the lovely French village of Argentière. We were enjoying an alfresco meal under the peaks of Mont Blanc. So This is be our last stay, and this is on day 11, where perhaps was the most brutal among the most spectacular. It was a hot and steep ascent, the Grand Bacon Sud trail with uninterrupted views of Mount Blanc. And this is where you encounter probably some of the only ferrata or metal supports on the trail. So we hear the scary ladders at the Guy d'Argentière, which we all were able to conquer easily. And you could see people were getting stacked up, going up some of the ladders and cables. And then this is how we celebrated at the end. We had generally very gorgeous weather, and really do recommend going on that hike. So again, this was in 2019. And having been there, we thought that we would always want to go back and do the Italian Dolomites. So 4 years later, here we are all ready to survive the 9.5-hour trip to Frankfurt. And then we're on our way to Cortina d'Impresa, just outside of Venice, to start our hike in the Dolomites. So as one travel writer wrote, these are unlike any other mountains, are to be seen nowhere else among the Alps. They arrest the attention, teeth like the jaw of an alligator. So this shows you the approximate location of which of the Dolomites where we were. And we visited a number. We started, here is Cortina, which was our base of operations. We took a shuttle that was arranged by our tour company to the Lago de Braes. And from there, we hiked, and our first day, our lodging was the Refugia La Varela. Then the second day, we're at Lagazoi. Then after that, Pasos de Lanza, then Vasilier, and then eventually, when we get down to this section, on this trip, we actually had 14 clients and a guide. 15 people is a very, very large number to be going into these rural refugia. So at this point, we had at Paso Duran, I think its total capacity is like 12 people. So we had to leave the trail, catch taxis, and then get transferred over to our refugia, a larger refugia, and then brought back the next day to continue our hike. And then we came down here to Refugia Pian de Fontana. And then on the last day, we catch the bus at La Pisa. Okay. Most Dolomite hikers fly into Venice, and then they bus to Cortina, where we encounter the first side of the Dolomites about 2 hours later. This is the Cinque Torri, the 5 fingers, on the outskirts of Cortina. So after paying our respects to Ernest Hemingway, who served as a World War I ambulance driver, and then later wrote from our Hotel de la Poste, we're finally off on our trail. And here we're doing a very careful accounting of all 15 pieces of luggage. Of those whose luggage arrived, we did have 2 members who forgot to transfer their luggage when we were in Frankfurt, and so they pretty much did without. They pretty much survived with their tennis shoes, the clothes on their back, and what they could scrounge from the rest of us. So be very careful in your plane reservations, and know seeing if your luggage is being forwarded onto the next flight, because it was hit and miss. Half of us could get our luggage checked all the way through, and others of it had to pick it up in Frankfurt and recheck it in. So this is day one. This is the Lago de Braies. We're going from Lago de Braies to Refugia La Varela, 13.1 miles and 5,000 feet elevation gain. And so, as David writes, these are deceptive smiles at the beginning of the hardest day, beginning with 3 hours of steep switchbacks, and then the fun begins with cables. And this is some rock art right there next to the lake. Here's some of the things that we're beginning to encounter on this stretch. You know, some of the rocky things. You can see the lake in the background here, but we're still all having a very good time. Things aren't overly warm, and it's starting out to be a very nice day. Here on the Alta Via 1, just like Mount Blanc has their triangle signs, Alta Via 1 has this red and white with the number 1, or the triangle with the number 1 in it. One of the things about the Alta Via 1, it is the only route that doesn't really have any cables or require you to have any type of rappelling or rest gear on you. So we didn't have to have any climbing gear, climbing helmets, or and the like. And then this is one of our very first Refugia Biella, and where we stopped for coffee. A little bit further on, we stopped at the Refugia Cenis for lunch, and some very, like I say, almost very gourmet food available to us. At this time, we're relatively close to the road, so you know the places are much better appointed. Here we're at Refugia Peru, where we had one of our members was a little bit under the weather, so he got a ride halfway through the day. And this is we will be leaving the road from this resort. But then, you know, after retrieving him, then we're about ready to head through this valley on to La Varela. Okay. So about 7 hours on the trail, we have a short prayer at a local memorial, and then we run into the Refugia La Varela, which boasts the highest brewery in the Dolomites, which we be sure to taste. Then the next thing in the morning, we wake up, and it was hard to beat this area, which is known locally as the Marmots Parliament. And because of our long day ahead of us and the shortage of any refugiates along the way, we actually had to take our lunch with us. This is generally were enough refugiates that we would just have lunch as we came across refugia, which was usually about every 4 or 5 miles down the way. So here we are at La Varela, and this is we're going to go to Refugia Lagazoi, which is going to be 8.9 miles and almost a 4,000 foot elevation gain. We're now getting into the area close to where all the action in World War I took place in northern Italy. There were quite a few battles that were contested in the area. Here we get to see some examples of local wildlife settings, complete with a imported turtle. So this is the terrain that now we're in day 2 of our hike. So what we're going to be doing is this is what was stand in front of us. We're actually going to go all the way up to this pass. And then this is what it likes when you get to the pass. You know, you're looking out over nothingness. And then the next thing you do is you look down, and then now we're going down the other side of the mountain. This is the Lago de Lazoi, and then our trail just keeps on coming, gaining rise, you know, going through another pass in the distance. Okay. This is some of the World War I structures. It was very heavily fortified. They did a lot of trenching and caving in the area. And this is our Lagazoi, which is our highest point on the height at over 9,000 feet. And we wake up the next morning and it's raining, it's snowing, and there are high winds. So you can see that we're all bundled up for the day. And so this day we're going to go from Lagazoi to Refugia Avero, 8.7 miles and about a 2750 elevation gain. So you can see it's rather high alpine, as well as just the exposed Dolomite rock. As the weather improves, we encounter a goat-like chamois checks us out in the distance. And here, I believe that, I believe that's like a part of a ski area behind us. I should mention that at Lagazoi, they did have a tram going up there, so it's actually quite popular. People will do day trips. You don't have to, we hiked, 10, 12 miles, and these people just take the cable car up and spend the day and eat well, and then they can go down at night. So, and we all feel for this poor sap dangling off of a cliff, and it's only day 3. This is a sign letting us know that there is a refugia just slightly off the trail, and alerting you that if you do take the side road, they're going to be open. Okay. And I should say, this is the Cinque Terre, the 5 fingers rock that is very prominent in the Dolomites. We would be passing it for about 3 or 4 days, seeing it in the distance. Okay, here we are at Refugia Avero. We finally made it. Our table's ready, and this is our British guide, Neil Game, and David likes to say he was the only hiker in our group entirely color coordinated from head to foot. So one of the things that's happened since our earlier hikes is that with Brexit, we have used, for all 3 of our hikes, we use Mount Blanc treks, which is a firm based in England. Well, after Brexit, all of those British guides were no longer allowed to work in the European Union. So this is one person who had previously, he was previously a British national. He's been nationalized in France now. And so he is still able to operate and lead tours for the company, even because he is a European national. So we're getting ready for day 4. We're going to leave Refugia Avero, and we're going to Refugio Paso Stalanza, 11.2 miles and about a 2,000 mile gain. Our hikes were only probably no more than probably 20K. It's only about 12 miles or so a day. So it's very, and then and not an excessive amount of elevation gain. So just to let you know that hiking in the Dolomites, especially on Alta Via 1, is very doable for most individuals.
What does Alta Via?
High Route 1, Highway 1, yeah. And there's, I forget how many numbers, maybe 6 or 7, but like I say, Alta Via 1 is the most direct route. And like I say, it does not require any supporting climbing gear. But it's still relatively steep, and there is some exposure. So, and here we are enjoying our typical great day and looking for the next cappuccino break. We always like this. Here in the middle of nowhere, we see some little stringers, and then we see a turnstile. So that led David to, dang, now someone's got to go back to town for a shitload of dimes, if you remember the scene in Blazing Saddles. And here we have our friend Elaine trying to get around the rear end of a very large cow blocking the trail. Okay. Just to let you know about the history. I mean, earlier we saw the Roman roads around Mount Blanc. Well, people have been occupying this valley for the last 7,000 years. So they were, this was an area where there were Mesolithic hunters. They were believed that they would somewhat barricade or guard the passes and using it to get elk, ibex, and deer. And then this is, like I say, this is around the base of this rock is where they found the Mesolithic, a Mesolithic burial and evidence of other hunting activity. Okay. The weather's not always nice. Here we were forced to retreat to a former milking shed during a rainstorm. And then no sooner do we get out than we have a roadblock. And I kept on thinking, well, maybe the barn's just down the way, but no, we didn't pass another barn for miles and miles, but they were staying on the road or just walking along. Okay, here we've reached the Paso Stalanza, and it was interesting that we found out that the owner was actually a big Alaska fan and had even climbed Denali. So it's a very small world. The next morning, we're going from Refugio Stalanza to Refugio Vasilier, 12.1 miles, 3650 elevation gain. So it's a little bit cool in the morning, so we're all geared up, but that doesn't always have to last for very long. So this is one of the instances where we actually were walking along one of the highways. Our path is just probably never more than 5 miles away from a road, but we're, back away, so we're and then other sections were more like a gravel road in this particular section. Here we see eagle cutout at the Refugio Coldai, and part of the what's believed to be called the Saveti Formation. Just very large dolomite rock exposures, as well as sheep and the necessary guard dog. Okay. David, I have to admit, is one of our swimmers in that, so he was trying to visit as many of these lakes as possible. But after reading the guidebook, he read, the temptation to take a plunge should be tempered by the low water temperature. So I don't even think he dropped his foot into this lake, at high elevation. And here we're on the way. Like I say, in between the different refugios, there's places to stop. And here, this is the Refugia Tissi, again, with part of that backdrop of the very gorgeous rock formations. So you can see where we come up through this pass, walking down along, and then here's one of our team members just enjoying the sunshine in the area. So this is, again, looking south, what's ahead of us, still on the road to Vasilier, and then finally just exiting the valley, and along the way, they found this outcropping of fossils. So here we arrived at Vasilier in time for beverages. And again, it's we've encountered generally very good weather throughout our period in Italy. And so here we have a dinner and then a quick overnight stay. And then we're out and about, this time from Vasilier to Palla Favera. which is just a 7.6 miles and a 2,200 foot elevation gain. Here we had at this next stop, we had to leave the trail because, like I say, of the shortage of accommodations right on the trail with our extremely large group. So we're gonna hike 7.6 miles and then catch a cab. And this is some of the Forcella de Camp rock formations that we're skirting on our way south. Again, just beautiful country. And here we're looking along the trail. And then this is one of the few, excuse me, one of the few sections where we actually had some cables. And one of the things you learn is that they don't always put the cables where you need them, but they put the cables where it's easy to put them up. So, I mean, so you would encounter a cable, but the section before we're just sliding down on our bottoms along these rock faces. It was in this area that we ran across some paragliders and people with squirrel suits, if you know what those are. Those are just like a wing, a bat wing. So we're out there walking in the woods, and next thing you hear is this, and then you see this guy flying by in his bat suit. They were supported by helicopters and that, but it was just somewhat unexpected here in the middle of nowhere. A very expensive pastime. So here we just stop in at the Refugia Carestiato for lunch. And this was the home of David's famous grilled cheese sandwich. It literally had to be over an inch and a half thick. But it was very good when you're hungry like this. And you can see we're relatively high up, and you can see the valley in the background. So here we've done our overnight stay off the trail, and we're back again. And now we're going to be going to the Refugio Pian de Fontana. This is our second to the last day, just 10.1 miles, but a 3,800 foot elevation gain. So some of the glorious backdrop of the Dolomites. And you can just see we've come through here, coming up this way, and we're just progressing higher and higher to get to the pass. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's two people right there. And that's our destination for this section of the trip, is here, around, and then up the ridge line and following it around. So this is very good description of now for the steep but short hands-on ascent up a near vertical crest with a little bit of exposure. It was quite an understatement. People were very happy to be done. They literally, they had survived. This is our most arduous section of the trail. So shortly after this led us just on the other side. We see the opening of the Forcella de Zedi Sud, which is just the gateway to a very beautiful valley, which is down below. So we're on this high ridge line, and now we're going to just drop down to our refuge, which is about another 3 or 4 kilometers down the road. Okay. This is one of those disconcerting moments. Here you're coming down a trail. It's a 1-lane trail. And then all of a sudden you got about just 3 kilometers to go. And then you see the sign says difficult route, steep slope, experts only. This is a small sign. They actually had like this big giant billboard out there. And I didn't want to wait around to get a picture of it because, my friend was about ready to freak out. It's like, well, where do we go? Where do we go? And like, there's only one trail. And there's only one way that we can go. So uh, after we get through the worst of it, again, this is when they start to put in, because they could in this section, it was very easy to install the cabling. But like I say, it wasn't necessarily where we needed it most, a little bit earlier up the trail. And then this is coming into the Pian. You traversed east, hugging rock faces studded with edelweiss and saxifrage. To the south, to the curious rock spike of Bishop's Needle, said to have provided anchorage from Noah's Ark, no less. And I believe this is what they're referring to as Bishop's Needle. And then this is our last refuge that we would be staying at during the day. Rather more primitive conditions, rustic. But, you know, we did have good dry accommodations, sharing as all the outlets that are available to us. A number of the refuges are on the road system, even if it's just a gravel road. In this particular case, the entire refuge is being supported by this tramway, which goes a mile down the valley. So this is not for people. This is just for hauling the gear up and the garbage out. And here we were, our last member has arrived, and so everybody has exited out of the refuge to cheer him on and for a successful trip. So here we're about ready to enjoy a meal of Dolomite bread and hot pasta, as well as our beer and wine. So this is our last day. The fog has come in, and we just have 8.4 miles to go, a mere 1,000-foot elevation gain, and we're on our way to La Pisa, which is the end of the trail. But fortunately, along the way, we have one last refugia at Benichet before the long gravel road to civilization. So, and then here we are, finished at last. Like I say, we've made it to the bus stop, you know, just waiting for the bus and having a very successful trip. And you can see all of our gear, we just have probably about 25 to 30 liter packs is all that we needed to carry. So we're carrying very light. We did have a baggage service, but like I say, we could only encounter them about every other night. So at this particular, that last refugia was definitely off the road system. So whatever we needed that night, we had to carry it from the previous refugia. So just for an overview, as far as the logistics and that, the Dolomite treks cost about $2,800 per person, and that includes a guide, breakfast and dinner, for as well as accommodations for 8 days. The Mount Blanc treks are a little bit more at about $3,450, in part because they're it's a longer hike, as well as it has nicer hotels and food. Hotels at the start and end are in addition to these trekking fees, and lunches and alcohol are extra. We were always good to support our guides with a healthy tip. We cannot emphasize enough that you need to book early. We booked about 10 months prior, and even at that time, we were having difficulty making arrangements at all the different refugia. It all came together, but we were not probably getting some of the best locations because probably a year to 10 months is probably the minimum in order to make plans. Also, if you can, try and avoid the European vacation time, which occurs in August. Our trip was at the beginning of August, and so we were on the trail right during when all the Europeans and Italians started heading to the Dolomites, but so they didn't interfere with us. There's a large number of tour companies. For all of our 3 hikes, we started out using Mount Blanc treks, but there's also others such as Mac Adventures, Backroads that will provide what you want. And so you could either, one of the other important things is deciding on whether you need a guided or unguided. We honestly did not need a guide on any of our hikes. We just put it as a safety. Also, it means like with our larger group, there was no decision. He made the decisions. There was no discussion. We just did whatever he did, and it worked out very well. So, so thank you. Okay. For those online, if you could put any questions you might have in the chat, and then Diane will pass them on to us. Thank you. Are there any questions in the room? Yes. The question is there a typical greeting when you're when we were on the trails in either Mount Blanc or the Dolomites? And I really don't remember anything special. It was surprising that for the number of people hiking there, we generally wouldn't, other than at the refugio, we probably wouldn't see anybody for the majority of the day, if not all day. We're all moving along at about the same speed from day to day. And it's even surprising that even the people that we were sharing the refugio with, we wouldn't see them until we arrived at the next location. So we're pretty much all out there moving along the course at the same speed. Yes. Any other questions? Yes. Okay. There was 2 questions. The first one was whether anything we would have done differently. And the second is whether we ever took any days off and, the rest in that. We did have, and on both trips, we did have a layover day built in. Planning so far ahead, last minute changes are not amenable. We had people who end up having to do like 20 some miles because they did not have, they had been lucky up to a point in finding accommodations until were passing through a small refuge and there was no room and they had no other choice but to hike the 8 miles to the next refuge, which may have had an opening. So generally, you want to build in any layover days and that beforehand. Also, it's such gorgeous country. Around Courmayeur, I could have spent a week there. There's Roman ruins, there's medieval ruins, and everything in that area that was just as interesting to me as it was hiking in the mountains. So plan ahead. So if you think that you want to have a layover, build that in when you make your initial reservations. Or the other thing that people do is we did a through hike from beginning to end. But a lot of these are accessible as day trips. Like I say, there are cable cars and tramways that are available such that you could take a bus to the base of a tram, get up to the elevation, do your day hike, and then return to town and, do something different from day to day. Yes. Okay, the question is which trails require gear? Okay, like I say, on the Alta Via one, no gear was required. So you didn't have to have any climbing harness or a helmet or anything. That's what makes the Alta Via the most popular route in the Dolomites for the casual hikers. AV2, 3, 4, and that all have sections with exposure that require to be carrying a climbing harness. Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
So, questions actually, daily temperature, and then season. Obviously, snow prevents access to a point. Snowfall on the canyon.
Oh, okay. The question is, what was the temperature range? And then secondly, what was the season in which you can visit? We did our Mount Blanc trip in latter part of July. We've had lows were probably in probably the 40s, and then with many summer-like days. But yeah, as uh, July and August are the most popular times for both of those routes, and generally the weather is not a problem. You will encounter, like I say, we did cross some snow fields as late as mid-July. I think that's going to be there. It's only when you start getting into like into September that you may actually have to be traverse or going through fresh snow and the like. Uh, Actually, I don't think anybody ever had to put on any. Uh, One, it's cool in that, and also there's enough of a breeze that no, we probably should have put on more sunscreen. Just because we are at high elevations, and when the sun comes out, it is quite warm, and people uh, uh, the the zip off pants were extremely popular among most of the people, just as a way to uh, better all the gear that we had to pretty much carry because we had to have our rain gear and heavy coats and that. So that's something that we would never leave to chance. Yes. Okay. Yeah. The question is whether you have to have a permit to hike, and where do you get them? Uh, our permits were as part of our package. Uh, when we arranged the hike, they took care of making all of, in addition to making the room arrangements and that, they took care of any permits. One thing to be aware of is that you are responsible uh, for your own extrication if something happens to you on the trail. So in addition to just having health insurance, a lot of people, um, you want to have extrication insurance. Uh, if you talk to your healthcare provider, you will quite often say you're taken care of once you get to the hospital, but that ambulance ride or that helicopter ride is your responsibility until that point. So there are a number of different services that will provide that care. Also, if you're in country, if you just join the local hiking club, that will give you the helicopter insurance. Just by your $15, $20 fee for joining the club, being a club member, if in an emergency, that will cover uh, your helicopter flight. So. The question is whether people could arrange these trips themselves or you have to go through an agency. Uh, if you wanted to start ahead of time and you didn't mind doing all the logistics, you technically can do it yourselves. This is one where paying for the service is probably a lot more easier because they have the connections of the different vendors, whether the different refugia, and have built this up, that you as an individual will be working around these other groups that have that are more of a planned hike and that people have bought into, and because they've already reserved the rooms and the like. And just so doing the schedule, you can, like I say, it's possible that most of the refugias are online and that you could look at their calendars. Uh, it's almost easier for most of us. Uh, but if you wanted to do a more of a ad hoc hike where you're going to stay in town and do a day hike and maybe stay over a night or two, then you could have more flexibility and arranging that. But just trying to, in our particular, we're pretty much in lockstep with everybody around us, that everybody is from day to day, they're generally moving this 8 to 12 miles down the road. And so there's not all that number of refugia that there may not be some bottlenecks. But again, if you, like I say, plan on a year, 18 months ahead of time, and you should be able to get the accommodations that you desire. Yes. Okay, the question is, what's the perfect size of the group? Our last group, like I say, we had 14 clients, and that definitely is pushing that's probably pushing or exceeding the limits. We were restricted even planning, almost a year in advance, that they couldn't accommodate us in some refuges. Also, it was only because of our long-term relationship that I think the guide accepted 14. I don't think he'll ever do that again. I mean, we had no issues, but I think it was very obvious that we were all compatible. We all knew each other. It's different than where we have dozen different or a half a dozen different groups of or couples coming together, and so we all had a built-in cohesiveness that it was easier to manage than it would be, a half dozen individual groups of clients. But I would say 8 to 10 would be a good number to do, or even less than that, depending on, because we had a larger group, we arranged shuttles. And so you want to be looking at what's the capacity of a van that you're going to be renting to get from, like I say, we had to leave from Cortina and get up to the lake. We could take a bus, which is going to take half a day on their schedule, and in which case is going to make it a very long afternoon to traverse all that distance in time to get to the nearest refugia. Anything else?
The average age of the group?
We were probably, first time we were probably in the late 60s, and the last one, I would say our average age was probably about 72 to 73. We had, our oldest member was, I think we had 2 members who were 77.
Well, then my next question is, I know Elaine has had lots of different surgeries, knee and hip. And
Yes.
stuff. So how much difficulty was there with this group? And I mean, I'd like to do this, but I'm not sure I can do 12 miles a day or more.
Well, that would, the question is, what are the limitations? Like I say, there's really not a definite age limitation, but it's just whether your physical fitness. We, at the end of it, realized that this was probably the most difficult thing we had ever done. And while we would probably do sections of the trip, we may not obligate ourselves to doing like all 8 days. But no, every one of our members made it completely. Well, we really, our only injury, David had to fall in the mud in the woods. That was it. I mean, after all the traversing of the rocks and the boulders and that, he slipped in the mud. But that was our only injury. I was really worried whether I was going to come back with all my teeth or, my glasses or anything. But again, we all had trekking poles, at least one trekking pole to support us. I'd given it some thought. Is as a rule of thumb, I would think is if you can go up and down Bird Ridge, you're not going to have a trouble on either of these hikes. It's the length of the day, and then, like I say, by planning ahead, there's enough refuges so that you can do different lengths, or you can leave the trail, take a car, shuttle around, and revisit the trail in another section. But like I say, if you can deal with the bouldering on Bird Ridge, you could do the Dolomites without any issues. If you can go up the backside of Flat Top, you're not going to have any trouble with Mount Blanc. So those are just some local heights in the area. And so, like I said, if you're physically fit, I wouldn't let that stop you. I would just maybe be cautious of whether you want to just do day trips or actually committing yourself to a 9 or 10 day circuit, or like I say, by doing day trips, you can go however far and as long as you want.
Well, round the
Thank you, and I hope that you guys, people do take advantage of visiting Italy and France and Switzerland. It was a very enjoyable time, and really do recommend it as putting it on your bucket list. Thank you.